Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Wehle. This is Simple Politics. My guest today is Jamie Gorelick, a partner at Hale, that has an extraordinarily illustrious career both in private practice and government. I think probably most well known for her role as Deputy Attorney General in the Clinton administration, but has done so many things. And I just want to thank you first, Jamie. It's quite an honor to have you come to Simple Politics.
Delighted to be here.
So I actually listened to a conversation you had recently, I think with law.com, about a former colleague of yours who is now Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland. And if I have this right, he was your principal deputy in the Justice Department. And I want to talk a little bit about the big case he worked on then. But I was really struck by you mentioned that when you found out he was Attorney General, or that he was nominated, you and your spouse, quote, hugged and cried. And I was wondering if you can explain why a person like him, and I don't know him personally, I've appeared before him in the DC circuit, why a person like him would trigger that kind of response around a job like Attorney General for people who don't understand what the Attorney General does.
Oh gosh, this is so overdetermined. I can give you a million reasons why. So I've known Merrick since we were in college, when he was a freshman and I was a junior. And we've stayed friends since. And he and his wife and my husband and I have just known each other. We're very close friends. And I'm just one of his biggest fans. He was my absolute right arm at the Justice Department. The principal associate deputy AG is called the PAYDAG, and it is a damn important job, and really important to whoever is the deputy. And then when he was nominated to be a member of the Supreme Court, I was part of a very small group of people trying to get that to happen, and was crushed when it didn't happen. And then I worked really hard advocating with whoever I could that he would become Attorney General. So I had a lot personally and professionally invested in his becoming AG. And when I say professionally, I mean because of what I thought he would do for the Justice Department, which I love. And I just thought it needed him. It needed him.
And what is that? What is it that the Justice Department needs that he, newly on the job, can bring?
It needs a commitment to the rule of law and to the equal application of the law to everyone, so that a president's friends are not treated any differently than an ordinary person, nor are a president's enemies. Merrick first came to the Department of Justice as a special assistant to Ben Civiletti, following the tenure of Ed Levy, who came in after Watergate, at which time the Justice Department was similarly in need of repair. And it fell to a very young Merrick Garland to codify, if you will, the things that the department should and should not do. And he's lived that. He has lived it, from being special assistant to the Attorney General, to being a line prosecutor, to being in the criminal division, to being a critical part of the Deputy AG's office. And then, he had 23 years or so on the bench on one of the most important, in one of the most important judicial positions in the country. And so he has a very strong sense of the law, what it is and what it should be.
So, when you mention the rule of law, I've been teaching first years now for 15 years or so. And most of them come in, or many of them come in, thinking the law is black and white. It's 65 miles per hour, you're in the box or you're out of the box. What is the answer? What is the answer? And I think it comes as quite a surprise that there's a lot of discretion, or what I say, squishiness in the law. So when you talk about Merrick Garland bringing the rule of law back to the Justice Department. Can you talk about, for a layperson or maybe a 1L or someone who's starting law school in the fall, what does that mean when, on the one hand, people think, oh, lawyers just originalists just read the plain language and translate it English into English. And then we have, on the other hand, this belief, I think, in particular after 4 years of the Trump administration, that prosecutors and DOJ lawyers and FBI agents are all just political actors. So when you say that, what does that mean? Where's that in between?
You start with the Constitution and the rights that are accorded everyone. You then look at the structure of the Department of Justice, and here you have the president saying when he nominated Merrick Garland, indeed when he ran for president, that he wanted to restore the independence of the Department of Justice. And look, the Department of Justice is part of the executive branch, but it occupies a special place because it is the mechanism by which justice is done. And there are a number of unwritten rules and norms that make it so, that make it revered by lawyers across the country and indeed the world. Most of the people, nearly everyone who works at the Department of Justice, is a career lawyer or a career investigator. There's a very thin layer of political appointees at the top, and they are in charge of reminding us what the norms are. A decision whether to prosecute someone for something complicated is not about whether you're over the 65-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's about whether the person had the wrong intent. It's about whether the purposes of the law in that instance are being advanced. And those are decisions that are hard, and they are informed by those norms, which is extremely helpful. A lot of what happens at the Department of Justice in all of its expressions, including the U.S. Attorney's offices around the country, is about lore as much as law.
So if you could point to one or two things and under the last administration that sort of in your mind puts it in a post-Watergate framework where maybe the traditional norms of equal access to justice or neutral application of the rule of law publicly, one of the public stories that came out, where you think it went in a place that was not consistent with the values of the Justice Department, what might that be?
The first national security advisor to President Trump, a man named Michael Flynn, pled guilty to felonies. And he allocuted, which means he stood in front of a judge and explained how and why he was pleading and what his guilt was. And the president had the Justice Department kind of undo that and dismiss the charges. In essence, that's just wrong. So that would be my top example. Another one would be he pardoned people who could have testified against him. That's just not right. And the pardon power is plenary, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it. But you shouldn't pardon someone who could give evidence against you. That's tantamount to obstructing justice.
So people who hear this might say, okay, Jamie Gorelick worked for the Clintons. The Clintons were crooked. This is what people, I'm not adhering to this. So this is a political statement to say that it was just wrong. But I also want to note to our viewers that you represented Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in connection with questions of ethics. So what is your response, again, to non-lawyers, people that read the clickbait or get these feeds in their Facebooks or watch it on cable news about all these political lawyers at the Department of Justice. What's your response to someone who just dismisses what you just said as anti-Trump, anti-Republican, uh, sort of, deep state career people who really have an agenda?
Um, when Jim Comey was fired by Donald Trump, I was not a fan of Jim Comey's. I knew him reasonably well, but I thought that what he did at the end of the campaign between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump tilted the election toward Donald Trump. I wrote an op-ed about this, and thousands of career prosecutors agreed. Thousands. It was at left, right, and center. This was the consensus view among anyone who had worked at the Department of Justice, whatever their politics. Second, when Merrick Garland was nominated uh, on a platform of restoring the Department of Justice from what had been aberrational years, nearly every living former senior official of the Department of Justice, Republican appointees and Democratic ones, signed letters saying that he should be confirmed. What he is saying he will do in restoring the norms of the department is the consensus view of pretty much everyone who has served in the department and reveres it. So I don't know. I've been dealing with people who dismiss views of those in opposing parties for a long time. I don't know how to deal with it. I just deal with the merits. I will say too, I took a lot of grief for representing Jared Kushner. My Democratic friends said, "Why are you representing Trump's son-in-law?" I said, "I'm a lawyer. He deserves representation. He says he wants to comply with the ethics rules. I'm going to help him do that. He wants an opinion on whether the anti-nepotism laws prevent someone from working in the office of the president. I think that he is legally able to serve. That's what I do. I don't put a political lens on the representations I undertake."
So I had on this show one of your successors, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who I think would agree with everything you said about the ethos of the Justice Department. But his boss, I think Bill Barr, who was also grew up in the Justice Department, has a long history of being a career person, many believe departed from that value system of the Department of Justice. For example, Judge Amy Berman Jackson in the District Court in Washington, D.C., issued a decision last week in a FOIA case quite critical of Attorney General Barr for issuing a 4-page summary of the Mueller report in advance, and then of the issuance of the Mueller report, but then not being candid with the court about a memo relating to that decision. So, do you have any views on, not Barr in particular or in general, people who are expected to have your sort of neutral rule of law, not red versus blue approach, but depart from that? How are people to think about someone like that, or that kind of shift?
So, I know Bill Barr, reasonably well. I knew him when he was in the Office of Legal Counsel, and I knew him when he was Deputy Attorney General and then Attorney General. And when he said that he wanted to serve again, I actually was relieved. I thought, I'm not going to agree with him on a lot of policy issues, but he will be an institutionalist. He will protect the department that I love. I don't know. I'm not an expert in the, you know, in the Amy Berman Jackson opinion, or um, in the memo in question, on the memo in question. Um, and I don't know, for example, how some of these decisions, like in the Flynn case, how they came to be. But I do know that they gave rise to an appearance of favoritism, that I think was not good for the department.
So I think that's important to underscore again for young lawyers that the appearance of a conflict for lawyers is a consideration, particularly within government, separate and distinct from an actual conflict.
Well, this is not so much about a conflict of interest, although you're right that our bar rules do ask us to uh, avoid both the appearance and the actuality of a conflict of interest. This is about the appearance of favoritism in the application of the criminal laws, which um, Attorney General Garland has quoted one of his predecessors, Attorney General Jackson, who later went on to serve in the Supreme Court, and whose portrait was in my conference room when I served, because he was so clear about the enormous power of prosecutors and how important it is for them to wield that power in a way that is and is perceived to be fair. It's critically important to who we are as a people.
Because, I mean, the difference between a private lawyer and conflicts and a government lawyer is private parties don't have the power to bring cases that put people in jail, that is, take their liberty away or even their life, if a charge produces the death penalty. I think that's a distinction a lot of people don't really grasp. That is, if I were to arrest someone, that's kidnapping. If a police officer does it, that's a legal arrest. And I think these kinds of concepts, as I try to do and break down in these conversations, so there's an understanding, as you indicate, of the awesomeness of this power, the
Right.
gravity of this
It
power.
is an awesome power. I mean, two litigants in a civil case, they should just go at it and make sure that all of the arguments are on the table. This is why I had no issue with representing Jared Kushner or any of my other clients. They deserve to have a full-throated defense, a full-throated articulation of their position, knowing that on the other side, there's someone presumably just as capable of making the counter argument, and a judge who can adjudicate. The ability to summon someone before a grand jury, to charge them, and indeed, in the end, if the prosecutor is successful, to put them in jail and take away their liberty. That is huge, and it comes with a responsibility to exercise restraint, judgment, humility, and an appreciation for what happens if you're wrong. And what I have seen in Attorney General Garland his entire life is that he appreciates all of those things, and I think that's the kind of Attorney General he currently is and will be.
So I want to shift a little bit to the power of the presidency, in that the attorney general is a member of the cabinet that is directly reports to the president, and then in your position in the Clinton administration, you were right below. So one step between you and the president of the United States. And just like all of us, there needs to be accountability for presidents. Um, it seems like after two impeachments with Donald Trump, and frankly, the impeachment of Bill Clinton that many thought was politicized or sort of tarnished the mechanism of the impeachment power as a measure of accountability. We have the January 6th commission flailing in the United States Congress because we have a political party that's not willing to stand up for the people that died. And that very question actually kind of we may or may not see it because of the filibuster. So my question to you is, what is the role of prosecutors as distinct from legislatures? Because it feels to me in this moment so much happening in out of the Manhattan DA, now the state AG in New York, all of this around potential grand jury investigation now into Donald Trump's organization, maybe indictments. But it seems to me people there's a shift in accountability to prosecutors for something that arguably should there should be some accountability within the structure of government. That is, Congress is set up to hold the prosecutor or to hold the president accountable. Mitch McConnell said after his vote to acquit in the second impeachment, oh, well, we've got a judicial system. So, can you weigh in on, in your experience, where is that line between the role of prosecutors? And of course, we see hundreds now of indictments of people that participated in the insurrection. But what about accountability for the people that hold the kind of power you're talking about, the people that can call balls and strikes in terms of someone else's liberty or whether they're going to take action?
Well, the Congress has the power of impeachment, but it is in the nature of the structure that it is partly political. It just is, and it always has been. I began my legal career right at the cusp of Watergate, right after President Nixon resigned, when the support for him hemorrhaged. The Republicans said to him, "We cannot support you anymore." And that is the right. I mean, and he resigned. He would have been impeached otherwise and convicted. That was the right result. They were not there until the tapes really, the release of those tapes really laid it out and made it untenable with the American people. And so it is a mixed adjudication and political judgment. It just is.
I mean, were you surprised or are you surprised that there hasn't been political accountability in terms of the facts and the last two impeachments and the facts relating to Nixon's resignation that you just described? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I do think that I thought particularly in the second impeachment trial, um, I think the impeachment's made a very strong case. I really do. But uh, and you have Mitch McConnell, for example, saying he would have convicted if the president had still been in office. You know, I, I think that there is accountability ultimately with the American people. I think, President Trump lost. He lost, and he's a one-term president forever. He lost the Senate, um, and before that had lost the House. So I do think the American people do pay attention. I think, apropos of your comment about people thinking that whatever I'm saying is just politically motivated. We do have two different realities in our press right now, and that makes it very different than what we've had for most of the life of this country, where we had common facts, which we don't know how.
which is, I think, the bread and butter of lawyering, you mentioned before, is a common set of facts, and then you make your arguments based on those facts. Whereas now we've got two sets of facts, which
Yep.
is very.
Having served on a 9/11 commission with 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, um, we were able to come to a common set of facts, a report that was unanimous, um, and readable, I might add, because we locked ourselves in a room and went to ground. So when we had a debate about the facts, we'd pull out the documents, we'd look at the witness interviews, and we would we would decide what the facts were. And it's really, the facts are powerful when you have to confront them.
So I'm glad you mentioned your service on the 9/11 Commission. I'm wondering if you can weigh in on what you think should happen around January 6th, uh, and whether Attorney General Garland might take any action. I mean, I know you don't know sort of all the
I know
details.
nothing. I don't ask him and he doesn't tell me.
Sure, I know you don't have any inside information, but just knowing him, and the political undertones, is this something that he would avoid, by virtue of the politics of it?
Prosecutors are used to working within the four corners of a case. And that's going to happen here. You can already see it. So I don't know, because we don't know whether people are providing information as part of dispositions of cases and the like. I don't know what additional information will come out about what motivated people, who asked whom to do what, who paid for what, and that sort of thing. But I don't think you can expect to have a full articulation of what happened in the run up to and the day of uh, January 6th from the Department of Justice. It isn't in their remit to ask or answer the question, what did the Defense Department do? Who asked for help? Who made what judgments along the way? What did the Park Service do in granting a permit that then turned into an attack, a permit for a rally that turned into an attack on the Capitol? How did the money flow to support the event? There are lots of things you would want to know that I think are unlikely to be the product of however many, even if it's over 400 cases. I just, it's not the right instrument.
Now, that's a really interesting point. So we've got January 6th and the videos we've now all seen, which now some people are reframing, but of, people climbing over the Capitol, the violence. So those people are being investigated, prosecuted. But you're talking about the days leading up to January 6th and what happened at the higher echelons of government in connection with what happened on January 6th, not the people on the ground. And that's the part that DOJ wouldn't necessarily look at. Why not? And if not, whose job is it to get to the bottom of that stuff?
Well, the why not is about what it takes to make a case and whether the person you're prosecuting has evidence to provide about others. And if a case can be made with the evidence that they have, and the person is not uh, providing evidence about others, that's the end of it. There'll be a prosecution. People will pay penalties for what they did. Many people will go to jail, but you won't find out necessarily. You could, but you won't find out necessarily the fuller story. And you certainly won't find out anything about the other institutions, the Department of Homeland Security, the Park Service, DOD, the National Guard. There's no call in a criminal case to find any of that out. My experience in the 9/11 Commission is that we found out a tremendous amount simply by asking every person in the chain of command in each of the departments and agencies. What did you know? What did you do? Who did you talk to? What did you write? Where did what you write go? and following it. And indeed, we found out that a number of the things we were told at the very outset, at the most senior level, simply weren't true. By piecing it together in a painstaking way and giving the American people that full picture that I think they deserve. So we need to have that. I would note that the 9/11 Commission uh, was chartered by Congress at the end of 2002 and began to work in 2003, so 2 years after the event, and only after a congressional inquiry failed because it got so tied up in the politics. This is hard. It's hard to look at yourself,
Mhm.
and people don't want their actions to be examined. And so it's tough. And here, Congress is full of witnesses. So it's even harder. So I think this is going to be tough to get. And I'm not at all sure that we will have it soon.
Do you think we will get it eventually? And will it require adjustments to the filibuster in order to not require 10 Republican senators to get on board?
You could have a joint congressional investigation in entirely Democratic hands. It wouldn't have a bipartisan patina, but it'd have the facts, or a lot of them. In fact, if I were a Republican leader, I would really rather have 5 seats at a table of 10. I would rather have shared responsibility and decision-making authority over subpoenas. It's a risky play.
The risky player saying to object this way, because the alternative could be a purely Democratic probe that will issue the same or similar subpoenas, get to ask a lot of the questions that might be hard to be asked, but without their input.
The
That's
Republicans had, I don't know, 5 different Benghazi hearings. I'm not suggesting that Democrats do a version of the Benghazi hearings, which were ridiculous, but you can gather a lot of information in a congressional hearing setting, and you don't need to do it by December, which is ridiculous.
right.
Also ridiculous. I mean, we had 18 months of investigative time.
And that's the proposal on the table that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy pushed and everyone agreed to in the Democratic side. Then he said he backed out, but that would require completion of this investigation by the end of this year, which is hard because you go where the facts lead you, right? And they might.
Well, not only that, I mean, you'd have to, I mean, so the in December of 2002, Congress passed the legislation. I think we had our first meeting in March. It takes time to find offices and hire people and get them cleared. This is not, you don't snap your fingers and create a highly sophisticated, meticulous investigation. You just don't.
And we don't want it that way, I would think. I want to shift gears again a little bit and talk about corporate America. And you're now in private practice for many years. You have private clients on the board of directors at Amazon. And what is your experience as a lawyer working for private corporations or private clients as distinct from serving in government, in the Justice Department, and other places in government where you've served?
I mean, it's vastly different. In the government, and when I was general counsel of the Defense Department, when I was assistant to the Secretary of Energy, when I was deputy at Justice, I mean, your job is to follow the law and do the right thing. Your job as a private advocate, an advocate for companies, universities. I represent a lot of universities in my pro bono work. I have a lot of pro bono time devoted to things like policing cases and women's rights, immigrant rights. Um, my job is to be the most forceful and effective advocate for my client. Now, sometimes that involves getting the client to do the right thing. You are often, at least in what I do, in a position to say, if you want to put this behind you, if you want to protect your reputation, here are the things that you need to do to make things right. And that is uh, a public interest service in and of itself. So, I mean, I like it. I like it very much for the variety of what I do. I enjoy meeting clients in all different lines of work. I mean, I have done, I've, I've ridden on a tractor at a parsley farm. I've driven the racetrack at the Daytona Speedway. I've uh, uh, climbed around in a submarine tender. I love getting my hands dirty, understanding an industry. I'm partly a voyeur, I suppose, but if you're a curious person, being a lawyer is just a wonderful thing. And I feel very comfortable with the notion of being an advocate against another skilled advocate. I do also a lot of internal investigations for companies. So I spent a lot of my time in the last couple of years looking at racial and sexual discrimination inside companies to make sure that the companies understand what they have going on underneath and to right wrongs within companies. And that's also a very satisfying part of my practice.
I look at your career and as a woman, it's really just so amazing and admirable in part because I have a lot of lawyer friends who left the law or, found it um, difficult either because of familiar obligations or a sense of just this glass ceiling, that it's just different for women in that work environment, that the standards are different. I wonder if you could weigh in on your experience of that, and if you have any sort of thoughts to share with this next generation of women who, the many that I speak to, there's a lot of anxiety there around these issues, and you're just sort of a beacon of success in this, and people will want to hear that.
Well, I do try within the institutions that I've been part of, including the Department of Justice, but also the two law firms in which I've worked, to make sure that there is equal treatment of women and minorities, and that we, put an arm around people and make sure that they are getting every opportunity. I would say most of the teams I work on now have a majority of the lawyers are women.
Hmm.
My law firm has a lot of very talented women uh, in it. Um, I want to go back pretty far, which is that both of my parents really conveyed to me that I could do anything. And most of the successful women I know had that, and particularly they had dads who thought they could do anything. So I think that's really important to convey to our children, that they can do anything. Um, and so, and I think it's also important to raise resilient children, because you are going to get knocked down. This is why I loved Hillary Clinton so much, because she kept getting up, got knocked down, a million times, and got back up. I admire that in someone. Just keep on going. Um, I have, I said jokingly a minute ago that I am kind of a voyeur. Well, I'm a very curious person, and the curiosity about the different worlds in which I have found myself uh, is in of itself motivating. Like I was really curious about the world of litigation, even though it was populated mostly by men, almost entirely by men when I started off. I was really curious about what my different clients did. Uh, I was very curious about the government. I worked at the Defense Department and the Energy Department when I was 28 and 29. Um, I was curious about the Justice Department when I went there, and the national security environment, which was almost entirely male. I thought, wow, look at what this country does to defend itself. I wanted to understand it, and I wanted to be able to be a part of it. And the same thing with my service on corporate boards. Everything I've done in the nonprofit world, in the for-profit world, in the governmental world, everything has cross-pollinated everything else. And I think if you're curious and you're resilient, you'll have a great career.
Have you ever had an experience, particularly early in your career, where you felt with all these men and not as many women, that maybe you were marginalized or silenced or had to speak in a different way to be heard, or maybe didn't get the project? Because this is an ubiquitous experience that women have. I'm not just in the law. I'm just wondering because you have just this incredible career that not many women have had. Have you experienced that? If not, how do young people similarly bypass
Oh,
those?
I've had that. I mean, one of my first cases was one in which a senior partner in my firm, a man, because there were only men and me for 7 years, uh, had a client who was a senior executive of a company that was under investigation. And the company was being represented by a former judge and a retired judge and who was a partner in a New York firm, who we might say was A, old fashioned, and B, thought very well of himself. And he came and we sat across the table from him, and he was asking us about the facts. Well, I knew the facts and the partner didn't. So the the man on the other side of the table, the retired judge, would ask the partner a question. The partner would turn to me. I would answer the question. And then the judge would ask my partner a question. He would turn to me. Never in 2 hours did this guy ever ask me a question. It was beneath him to direct a question to me, to talk to me directly. It was ridiculous. Um, and I thought it was ridiculous. And happily for me, my partner and friend just kind of let me take it. So I did. And I had a lot of experiences when I was a young lawyer with really gross jokes. I had a client who there were two guys running this firm, and they competed with each other to see who could gross me out first. So they would just tell one gross joke after another. I mean, worse and worse and worse. And I just was not going to give them the satisfaction of saying, you have to stop. I just said, go right ahead. So I come back to resilience and maybe add in a sense of humor, and just keep on going.
Keep on going. That's uh, that's fascinating. I think many of us have had those experiences, and you have those moments where do you say something or do you not? And if you don't, is that facilitating that culture? I don't know. There's not a clear path. I think some women would speak up and say that offends me, or why aren't you speaking to me, and things like that. I think older generations aren't as comfortable.
Yeah, the kids do say that's out of line, or I find that to be a microaggression or whatever. And I probably should have spoken up more, but I don't think I left anyone with the impression that I liked what they were doing. I just wasn't maybe quite as in their faces as my younger colleagues might have been.
Oh, how do you um, think about mentors for women? I mean, do you think they're important, and why? And how do young women, and I'm a mother of four girls, so I'm biased, I must admit, so I'm focusing on women, but how do you find mentors? Is
I
that
think people are very, very generous with their time if you ask them. Um, I
this is a case in point, this conversation?
we have a mentor, a formal mentor program in the firm, and every lawyer has a mentor. Every non-partner lawyer has a mentor. I don't participate in that program because I just have a parade of people coming into my office saying, "Can I talk to you?" And so I do probably, many times more what other people might do because I sometimes I don't have enough time, but I never say no. And I like helping people. I do. So my advice is find someone you think you might learn from and just go talk to them. Just say, can I spend 20 minutes with you? I have an issue, or there's something I don't know how to do, or I'm not getting along with the partner I'm working with, or I feel like I'm stuck in a permanent lieutenant role and not getting the real action. Now, in my firm, we do one other thing for women, which is that we've divided all of the women in the firm into breakfast groups,
Hmm.
and we have breakfast. That's all we do. There's no agenda for the breakfast. We just periodically have breakfast. And I have the longest running one, I think, in the firm. Uh, um, and it's got a core group of people who've been in it forever. Obviously, some people kind of come and go as they're in the firm and then they leave. But you get to know people that way, and it's not like a mentorship program, but you have relationships with people who bring to the table different things. Sometimes someone will come in and say, I'm 6 months pregnant. I'm worried about my leave. How do I do this? Someone else will say, I can't find a nanny. Does anyone know how to do that? Someone will say, the example I gave a minute ago. I so and so really says he likes my work, and he keeps putting me in the position where I'm making the trains run on time. I'm not learning anything this way, and we'll just talk. So I think the more opportunities there are for just informal conversation, I think the better. And so, I had mentors, but I never thought of them that way. They were just the people who marked up my work and told me I could do better.
Yeah, that's what in law they don't tell you you're doing well. They tell you you're doing well if you get more work. There's not a
That internal marketplace. If you start to slow down and you don't have people asking you to do things, that's when you worry.
yeah. Um, I want to circle back. We only have a few more minutes to this more meta question about where we're going, you know, in terms of the rule of law.
Yes.
And you mentioned, that you represent a lot of companies and you're on boards. Recently, with what's happening with voting, suppression efforts across the country, the big lie, all of that, we've seen corporations step up in Georgia and Florida publicly against voter suppression efforts. Or we also saw during the pandemic, sports teams donate that big arenas for voting centers. And so my question for you, in being so dialed into both worlds, do you see a role, an increasing role for the private sector in protecting these democratic values? And if so, what would that be?
If you are a leader of an American company, you know that one of the chief reasons for the value of your company is that you live in a country that has the rule of law. You just try locating a company in a place where the courts don't work, where there's a dictator. Just try it. Nobody's going to do business with you because they don't know if their own rights will be protected. The reaction that you saw from corporate America was just that the country they live in has to be a democracy that works, because it is one of the reasons for the value of their companies. And I think they reacted that way, and I think they stepped up. It is perilous, right, to take positions as a CEO in a highly divided country. It is not easy to figure this out. And I've had many, many conversations with many, many CEOs and senior executives. The most interesting thing to me is that in the last Edelman Trust Index, which comes out, I think, twice a year, the most trusted people in the United States are corporate CEOs by a lot. More than politicians, more than doctors, more than lawyers, more than the press, any other institution you can think about. And that is a big reversal from a number of years ago.
And what do you attribute that to?
I think that when people in this poll, I guess it was, were asked, who do you trust to be ethical and competent? CEOs were at the top. Competent because you get graded every day on how you're doing. You're either making money or you're not. Your employees are happy or they're not. You're good for your community or you're not. The feedback is pretty immediate. And ethical, I mean, ethics, every part of our society has ethical challenges. But I think if you compare companies right now to other institutions, you might find that companies you will find that companies are more highly thought of. I think too, corporate leaders today are people, they're worried about their country. They have kids, and the kids say to them, Mom, Dad, you got to fix things. You're a powerful person. You have to step up. I don't know anybody who's my age or who has kids who are anywhere from teenagers to 30 or 40 who hasn't had that conversation with their children. They say, hey, what kind of world are you leaving me? I'm certain that the CEOs that you see have had those conversations.
So, I worry, Jamie, and I'm not alone, that, okay, the midterms are coming up. The House and or the Senate could go to a party that right now is not interested in the rule of law, making it really clear. 167 voted against certification of the election, also joined a lawsuit in Texas to cancel votes in 4 other states. I mean, this is not democracy. Again, this might sound political, but to me, that's not democracy. And then we've got the Electoral Count Act that's in place with squishiness that leaves essentially room for the states after an election to decide to not pay attention to the popular vote and to just have the legislatures decide it. And then we have a January 6th in 2025 where a Republican dominated Congress could just decide not to certify a presidency and get away with it if it were a Democratic. So do you think corporate America understands that line of analysis or the urgency of it? If not, what do they need to do to get there? Because it seems like they do have power that is unused, not fully utilized.
Well, I mean, you saw companies act in essence boycotting Georgia when it passed laws that are restricting the right to vote. And companies can do that. I think we are at a moment of peril in terms of our democracy. My colleagues at WilmerHale have been at the forefront on voting rights for the Democratic National Committee and for the Biden campaign and others, and we're very active in this area. I think this is a call to lawyers. It is a call to civic leaders. It is a call to journalists. I mean, we have to protect that which is most precious to us, which is our democracy.
Well, I couldn't end it on a more important note. You're singing from my page, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you, Jamie Gorelick, for being on Simple Politics. It's been a real pleasure and honor for me.
Happy to be here. Great to talk with you.
So thank you all for watching.
It's a wrap.
But that was so great. Thank
So
you.
good. So good. Thank you.
Sorry about the lighting. I was fussing.
Oh, is that? Oh, well, I mean, that's no worries there. I did I last night I did a little chat on with Don Lemon, and my dog, my 10-month-old dog, walked in the room in the middle of it. I don't think it got on air, but we are all used to, I think, logistics.
I like, this is my study. I like sitting here, but in the late afternoon, the light comes this way and puts me in the shadow. There's not much I can do about it. But
Well, I think it looks great.
if you're 71 years old, you probably want to be in a little bit of shadow.
Well, and I'm not just saying this. When I saw you were 71 years old, I was like, wow. So you've got on top of everything else, the fountain of youth in your medicine
Well,
cabinet
thank
or
you very
something.
much. All right.
Those flowers look fresh. Are they from your garden?
They're from my garden.
Oh my gosh.
Here. And that's my Zen moment every morning. I go out into my garden. I get myself fresh flowers.
Well,
Great.
thank you again.
I'm so pleased to see you again.
No
You'll
problem.
excuse me if I didn't recognize you right
Oh,
away.
no.
But you have an excellent pedigree, my friend.
Thank you.
So we'll send you your
Yeah.
team,
Okay.
the interview and
All right.
clips of it.
Take
Thank
care,
you again.
Bye-bye.
Have a great evening. Bye bye.